go ahead and start it up whenever, Kills. Uh-oh, that's not good.
That's not good. Give me 1 second. I'll see if I can get a different button.
All right, well, early start to the recording, but we're going to just ramble with it until we've got it together. Let me know when you're good, Kills. So I will post the itinerary after we get our theme song in, and for those of you just joining, as you can see, the bot is having a bit of a seizure, so we'll take care of that. Kills is going to go quack at it and make sure it works. What we're going to cover tonight, for those of you that missed it, there's going to be a mini Nations at Risk segment. I promise nothing overkill. And then that'll be after I get through the internal stuff, and then we're going to hop into what has been a jam-packed last couple of weeks. It's been a lot going on, so a lot to cover. I have tried, I promise, I have tried to make this a larger than usual show, but I think everyone is just over it. So we're going to cover, for those of you that need to have an itinerary's knowledge, there will be all the mini stuff that has been that people have already spoken about. Then there'll be, we'll go over the Legion, all these bank lootings that have been happening, Carthago, Federation, those massive leaks that have been dropping, and then some mechanics stuff, and a final thought question to see where everybody is at. Oh, I see we've got work going on. Yes, -4 bauxite, that will be discussed. So that was really quite incredible. You think it's ready? Well, let's give it a go. Oh,
My bad.
yeah, I wouldn't call that ready. Let's see. It'll be we might have to play with no theme tonight, folks, which would be devastating. That, or I can play it off my phone. So let's look at one. No, I'm not giving you the file. I refuse. It's my file. There's no bot. Okay, well, give me 1 minute. I'll pull this up myself. Where is it? YouTube is complicating everything, folks. It used to be so simple. I am not singing it a cappella. Okay. Let's see if this works. Y'all let me know if you can't hear me. Hold on, let's see. So I'm sure the quality on that was atrocious. But yes, I don't worry about it, Kills. It happens. YouTube does odd things at odd times. So Oh, I have to post the itinerary for all of you fine people, don't I? And there we are. So, as anyone who can read can see, it's a bit of an odd night. First off, the internal stuff. So, in the real world, I have mentioned this a little bit, but to those who've spoken to me in the last 24 hours, um, writing formulas in Excel. If you don't know what you're doing, things get really wild, and you end up over 2,200 characters long, as I have found out recently. So I just had to share with that for all of you, in case you were wondering. Um, it is entirely possible to go over 2,000 characters in an Excel formula. Whether it processes it, I don't know, because I went too far and it wouldn't process it anymore. So keep that in mind. Something new. This is what I mentioned to those who have been listening: is nations at risk. There's going to be a. Am I going to make any comments? No, I don't think I am, unless you're willing to provide the article for me, in which case maybe I will. Um, the, I'm going to do a segment tonight, not an incredibly long segment, but a segment nonetheless on nations at risk. I was actually considering doing this, but in probably another couple of weeks, just to give it some space out between when Thalmor did his and when I was going to talk about it. However, I spoke with Spartan and here we are. So what the initials are for? No, it's not embarrassing at all. So IRL, self-explanatory. New, that's just something new that I've decided to mention. I didn't want to put NAR in there because I don't know how many people know that abbreviation. The RMDR is a reminder about sponsorship. So this is what this Nations at Risk thing is. It's a sponsorship of the show. And these do exist. You can reach out to me at any time if you want a link for something. We've done Orbis Debate Forum before. I've plugged my accounting server. There's probably going to be a whole lot more. If it's something as big or as important as this Nations at Risk thing is, it's a bit more of a sprawling topic, then you might even get a segment in the show on it. So, and really, they're quite cheap. So, just a reminder on that. Now, I'm going to go ahead and pull up who's in here, and let's see. Who do we have? Is anyone who's a Spartan's here? That's wonderful. Talon's here, but I'm not sure if he can speak. Okay, good. So we have all of our people. Hobbs and Talon, can both of you just confirm in the chat before I send you the invite to speak that you're both, your equipment's all set up, you're ready to go? Just a quick guess or anything. So Talon's ready and Hobbs is ready. Awesome. So let's see. Oh, can there we go. Awesome. So they both have I'm going to make sure their volume is up, and it is. They both have their invites, and we're going to take it one at a time. So for those of you wondering, what they're going to say is basically they're going to give an account of their experience and just some general information. And yeah, just I'll pretend you're a kindergarten class because you all have that level of attention span. Give them your eyes and your ears, and go ahead, Hobbs or Talon, whichever one of you want to take it off first.
Go for it, Talon.
All right. Well, hello. I'm Talon. I've been playing a couple of years now. I think really the thing that I want to just talk with Nations at Risk overall as a game voice mod.
You're cutting in and out. It's staticky.
What? Test 1, 2. Is this a little better?
A little bit, yeah.
All right. Whoa.
Okay,
I'm
we'll
hearing
back off a
myself
bit. Back
here.
off the mic a
He's
little
yelling.
bit there.
If you want me to go first, you can work on that because it's it's brutal.
That was, yeah, exponentially worse.
All right, last test. Is this better, or should I go get a different piece of equipment?
It's still
I'd probably go
staticky, but
chill.
it's not ear destruction.
All right. Go.
Okay, yeah. So I guess I'll start for you. It's Talon, so you can go ahead and get your mic set up. So like any good story goes, we should probably start at the beginning. But this is probably not going to be a good story, so I'm not going to. Because it's a politics and war based server, I figured I could do some justice, kind of comparing it and giving some things that I enjoy more. Um, First off is just general engagement. After you're finished raiding as like a new player, there really isn't that much to do in game. Most of the activities and work that's done is done outside of game. So pretty much I just log on now and that's about it, and buy resources when I need it. There's like the what is that? The betting bot or the betting thing, but that's about it. I don't even remember what it's called because I don't use it. But with
Kino?
nations at risk, huh?
Kino?
Yeah. That's what I was thinking of. But with nations at risk, there's a lot more incentives to log on in general. You've got different daily missions. You have raiding like normal in politics and war, but it's not limited to your score range. So you can hunt all of these smaller guys as well. And then you've also got the weekend events that have unique citizens that drop, which I thought was a pretty unique feature to add into a nation simulator. The second thing that I like more is the war potential. Right now, it's pretty interesting, but there's going to be some new things that get added into it later on. Talk a bit on that later. But so with politics and war, your military is capped by your city and the improvements that you put into it. With nations at risk, you have the freedom to have just as large of an army as the number one player if you have the resources for it. I kind of enjoy having that capability to be able to prioritize military if that's the way you want to play the game. I think it adds a little bit more of a strategic play into what you would like to prioritize and how you build your nation. So I think that has a lot of capacity to be expanded upon and kind of give a extremely thorough strategic method into adding war into games like this that makes it engaging and fun, but still has a decent amount of damage that happens to nations and things like that. The third thing is actually probably to Spartan's surprise is actually his willingness to improve on the game. When I joined, my low yield OCD kind of took over with a bunch of the UI issues that were there. And so immediately he took my suggestions and worked on it and had most of them implemented in a week for the ones that we agreed on. I kind of liked seeing that initiative into getting things improved based off of player feedback to make the game as enjoyable as possible. Talon suggested something around having bot events a while ago, and so that got brainstormed, and we came up with the weekend events. So it's just significant things like that that he's been able to really grab hold of and implement in a very engaging way. Um, One of the things that we wanted to expand on is the military. So I brought up things like aircraft carriers, which could expand your aircraft capability while making your nation's naval capability slightly less formidable. And so it adds another strategic layer to that kind of war. So it's not so linear, as in, all right, use planes and then ground attack if you want loot, things like that. But there's a pretty clear meta in politics and war. And I think in Nations at Risk, there's a bigger potential for that to be a lot more competitive than what we see in politics and war. This leads me to the beginning of the story. I joined Nations at Risk when I was in House Stark and asked to join the Peaky Blinders, which was their alliance in Nations at Risk. This was around the same time Alex's Armenian alliance was made there as well. It's kind of had the mutual goal of demolishing Jaden. He was in Polaris, who ended up signing treaties with number 1, 2, and 4 alliances by a large margin. So they kind of had a hegemony on the entire game. They made up the Whale Block, who had double the member count, over 20 members who weren't even able to fight in any of the wars because they weren't in anyone's range. So one thing led to another, and Peaky Blinders and AAA ended up merging into TLE. Um, Things kind of heated up between the hegemony and TLE, and it became a dog pile. But the dog pile did not go as expected. I got a link for you. That's a bit of Odyssey propaganda right there. So the whales ended up getting harpooned into oblivion because TLE was able to strategically beat them, and it wasn't just based off of who was bigger and who had more people and resources. So after that, the Lost Empire rebranded into Odyssey, and the journey began. So there was a round 2 where Odyssey actually declared on the Whale Block, who mixed it up a little bit and did a little bit better. But they ended up getting swept as well. So it's been a pretty intriguing game to wrap my head around, get into, and kind of see the different things that can be done. I think it has a lot of potential to become an extremely fun nation simulator.
All right,
we-
I'm going to try version 2. Is this better?
It is much better.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go, and kind of pick up where I thought I was going to be able to start earlier, and where Hobbs just left off at the beginning. I was able to join into Nations at Risk relatively early in development, though not back in the brown map days. Anybody who happens to maybe view some older YouTubes from Nations at Risk when it was first entering beta, there's some old brown map days. I think I joined right after brown map days. It was a community that was just coming together. They had essentially started the game with essentially endless minor wars between everybody. People just Spartan knew and invited his friends and friends of friends. And then there was just this initial recruitment to have some other people join the game, and I was part of that group that initially joined. And I think one of the most powerful things, as Hobbs mentioned, has been how responsive Spartan has been to development suggestions from day one. I like Hobbs, I had provided some feedback, within a couple days, just of some things that I observed that were just bothering me a little bit, and within a week, things significantly change again. It's been a really powerful journey to watch. Uh, Essentially, a bunch of people never stop fighting each other to moving towards an all growth and no fighting culture, and then watch this new block of newer players joined around when Hobbs did, and change it to more of a spherical world where we've got some conflict and some building going on. And with the continuing expansions and the end of the beta and all of the additional features that have come out, seeing more people joining every day and really watching you know it go from a community that was relatively static into a continuously growing community has been just really enjoyable. The mechanics are engaging. There's always something I can actually do to help my nation grow instead of just check in and, yep, I made some more resources, still can't do anything for 20 days. There's always something to be active and do. I think that for my experience in other nation simulators, there's a lot of activity outside of the game itself in conversations and in Discord, because since there's nothing to do in game, you got to do something to stay active. So you invent problems, you invent things to talk about, you invent challenges for yourself to be interested. But there's no need to really invent anything in Nations at Risk because the game itself is actually engaging in itself. And there's certainly plenty to do outside the game, but you don't need to invent problems or invent challenges just to keep yourself busy. There's plenty to do in game, and that's been what's kept me going from beginning to end. And yeah, I'm so out of other things to say right now. I just got home.
Okay, so I'm gonna actually go ahead because I've been playing for a little over a week now, and so I don't have nearly as much long-term experience as either of these folks do. But I will speak to what I have seen, and one thing that has really come across that you don't have in politics and war all the time, Spartan is incredibly responsive. I mean, within like a couple hours, incredible, and he's always able to help you if you have a question. So it's not at all like where you have to be afraid to kind of go reach out to a dev, or there has to be a sincere issue. He's there for large or small. I will say that it's a different step from politics and war. You cannot at all approach it with the same attitude in mind as politics and war because of how small the player base is right now. It's still a good size. I mean, like, we're what, 300 to 500 active players. That's not, tiny, but compared to politics and war, obviously it's a different type of game. And so to go in and expect, for instance, in your alliance that you're going to be engaging with people every other hour or like 3 times a day, you don't really need that. Because of the size of the game, activity is limited, particularly, excuse me, when a lot of people are both dual nations at risk and politics and war players. And there's also just not that much need for Discord communication. The main server is usually pretty busy, but depending upon the alliance you're in, things can get kind of quiet. That's not to say they're not fun or they're not engaging. Depending upon the alliance you join, you can grow pretty quickly. I was one who was able to join Odyssey, and I'm actually pulling up right now my details so that I can tell you all where I'm at. Depending upon the alliance you join, you usually can get to a fairly good size. A lot of things. See, the other difference is politics and war goes by cities. This game goes by just general score. But yes, for instance, I'm world rank 113 at the moment, while with a score of 561,000 after like a week of playing. And so depending upon who you join, you can probably beat that out, or depending upon how much aid you request and that kind of thing. I cannot speak to what a war is like, and I'm going to actually turn it back over to Hobbs or Talon to talk about that in just a second. But I'm not going to make any assumptions on what that's like. Could one of you tell us what, assuming you both have been through a war, what the experience is like, how you would calculate damages, what actual fighting is like? Can you tell who your targets are? Can you tell, are you outmatched, or is it just kind of a guesstimate? Just basic details on how war works. Either one of you.
Well, I'll get started, and then I'll ask Hobbs to finish off, because I definitely got my team's butt kicked in the last war. So we'll let the winning side kind of wrap up how success looks like, and I'll take notes. But in general, war looks like war anywhere else. You have a declaration or a surprise attack, and it's about coordinating your team to attack / defend in a reasonable way. We utilized the concept of trying to get as many people in an offensive against a single individual. The standard dog pile, oversize, break down the defenses. But one of the mechanics that is a little bit different is you can have your troops in 2 different positions. They're either fortified or they're deployed. So they're either in a defensive position and their only stats that matter are the defensive stats, or they're in an offensive position and the only stats that matter are their offensive stats. Offensive stats don't help you defend. Defensive stats don't help you attack. And team and troops that are deployed can't defend your nation. Troops that are fortified can't attack another nation. And you can only move those troops once per day. So if you go all in on being an offensive player, you leave yourself open to accepting, damage unhindered. If you go all in on turtle, then you let your opponent essentially go all offensive on you, and just like any standard war system, you're going to be able to be outnumbered if you have only attackers against your one defender. You're going to potentially lose out if you go 100% defense. So finding that strategic balance between attack and defense is definitely a piece of that strategy. How to tiering plays a role too. Inactive nations can be attacked by anyone regardless of size, but active playing countries are going to have to be within that score range for attack. So tiering is another thing that does still play an important role in war planning. We failed in the last war, so it was definitely a big learning to see that bigger war take place, because prior to these last couple ones, it was a little bit smaller. Hobbs, take over. I'm out of thoughts.
So here's the deal, and I'm going to try and say this as unironically as possible. The key to winning a war right now is to commit as many war crimes as humanly possible. And what I mean by that is destroying your enemy's population, because population has an effect on how many units that they can recruit for their nation. So if they're down to 75% of their population, this means that they can only recruit 75% of their maximum military. This goes with their buildings as well. You can destroy jazz clubs, hospitals, elementary schools, coal mines, nuclear plants, all kinds of stuff like that. And it's actually extraordinarily important to winning the war. If you looked at the stat sheet that I posted earlier, you can see how much of a difference there was between TLEs and the whale blocks damage differential. And the buildings at the very bottom, TLE destroyed 1,300 more buildings than the whales did, which means that their economy is ruined. So I should probably back up a second. When you destroy someone's building, what this means is the level that they currently had it at goes down one. So if you're destroying 1,300 buildings, that means pretty much your entire enemy's buildings have been destroyed down a level at least once, which means they're all producing less. Also, when you reach 0% population and 0% infrastructure, if you don't have 100% infrastructure, your production is penalized on top of that for not having enough. So I truly mean it when I say commit as many war crimes as possible. It's virtually just destroying their buildings, killing as many kids, old people, handicapped people, all citizens. We don't discriminate here, and all of their buildings as well. That's basically it.
I know a recording that's not gonna go up on YouTube. So it seems like the entire war aspect, and I'm hoping eventually I'll get to see some of it for myself, but the entire war aspect of this game is pretty similar to Politics and War in terms of what the end goal is, where you go in to blow up your enemy's stuff in the hopes that you do more damage and make them take longer and spend more to get back to normal. Any last comments from either of you before we wrap this up and move right on into the main theme of tonight?
Nah, I think I'm good.
No, thank you so much for having us. I just would love to see everybody give it a week and give it a try.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. And I do encourage everyone here to go ahead and take a look. Talon and Hobbs, I'll leave it to you two to figure out how to leave the stage. I encourage everyone here to go ahead and take a look at Nations at Risk. It's a fairly fun game. I have to encourage myself to log in at the moment, but I'm also not fully engaged in it. I'm sure if you sat down and took a deep look at it, you'd get engaged. It is fun. There are things to do. For those of you that are unaware, there are options where you work with your parliament. There's the planetary union. There's all sorts of different Dark Blade. I'm not going to let you get free stuff out of this. Sorry, bud. There's all sorts of different things that go on in the game to keep you interested if you're willing to pay attention to them. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and move back. Yeah, I had that issue too for a minute, but I just kept declining and it worked out. So the first topic that I'm going to cover is Epi's here, so he gets to listen to himself being spoken about. Camelot. Camelot was speed. So if anyone remembers, and I don't see why you would, because it was quite possibly the most irrelevant war of the last 2 weeks, Camelot went ahead and blitzed, I think they call themselves the Peripherals, but we'll get to that because I don't call them that anymore. The Soldiers of Liberty, USSR, and the Federation. And I think it was like within an hour they pieced out. I don't remember how long it was, but it was ridiculously fast. So it was a very quick war. Epi had fun. ARG went ahead and blew up the Observer. Somebody in there put something about ARG joining in a war on behalf of a spheres. It was some frankly ridiculous thing. ARG blew them up, and they essentially threatened to keep raiding the journalists unless Almighty Corporation and the other owners of the Observer gave in. They did give in. They paid $2 billion and something else. The name of their trusted source was given up. But yeah, $2 billion in cash. That's not a bad outcome at all. The Johnsons. So the fighting pan, and this was a really interesting move. The fighting pacifists no longer wanted to be called the Johnsons, right? That's kind of nobody really wanted that name that was left in TFP's group. So what they did is when they cut the treaty with the elites, they basically said the title of the Johnsons is going to go with the elites. We are cutting the Johnsons. So they've essentially gotten rid of that sphere name, which I thought was a very interesting tactic. But for anyone who missed it, the elites are now part of that Soldiers of Liberty Federation and USSR sphere. They signed into that. And so that was formerly called the Peripherals. It is my opinion that sphere should no longer be called the Peripherals, but should now be called, or the Perpetual. I don't care what they were called. They were some irrelevant name that nobody needs to remember. They should now be called the Johnsons. The elites, the sphere name, the Johnsons, was assigned to the elites to carry with them for however long they should live. And they have gone in and signed a different group. And so, or we can even name it, we can even name it the Perpetual Johnsons. And there you go. But the name the Johnsons must stick with some small micro-irrelevant sphere. And this name fits. So I expect everyone to start using that name because it's the only name that makes sense. Or don't use perpetuals, but if you can remember that, I owe you a cookie. The other news that kind of happened, TKR, they have their protectorates. They got, I don't know why they signed the World Task Force, but they did. And does anyone know if like the Federated States, are they any better? Is FSO any better under the Knights Radiant than they were not? Or are they still incompetent? I see a pirate typing, and so it doesn't bode well. Marginally. So they're still hot garbage, yeah. So this, and then them signing Mayhem. Now, Mayhem I'm not as worried about because that's, basically reforming the Imperium or the Order, that kind of stuff. They half know what they're doing. They've gotta. But if you look at the tiering that's going on here, it's really interesting. I don't know what the plan is with World Task Force and Federated States of Orbis, because if they're both still garbage, that doesn't bode well. But if you sit down and you look at the tiering going on in these alliances, World Task Force is all high tier. They're all like, their lowest member is still pretty low, but they have like 26 if you include vacation mode people. 26 pretty high tiered people. And even not VM'd, they've still got a pretty significant upper tier. FSO has a pretty solid C20 area. Not massive, granted. They've got a bunch of lower people as well, but they do have some pretty solid tier. Mayhem is pretty majorly upper tier as well. You have to wonder if they're like home growing their own grumpy. If they miss the grumpy old bastards so much that they have to try to home grow enough alliances to make it happen. That'd be an incredibly interesting tactic, but I don't know if it'll work. The time, it remains to be seen. Getting to today's not today, but the last few weeks, major news. The Legion has broken ranks in more ways than one. Not only have they left the back rooms, but there's a new leader, and that is because Istendor has, and I'm going to butcher the name, I don't care. He has resigned to go join Hand of Fate. Anytime somebody resigns from a position or leaves a position to join Hand of Fate, they've done something bad. Okay, let's just get that out of the way now. Anytime somebody in power gives up power to go join Hand of Fate, they've done something wrong. Sure enough, after fighting over it for I don't know how long, it's been revealed that not only has Istendor stolen 8 billion plus from the Legion, but he tried to cover it up. And that's the other thing. That's where, do you really belong in Hand of Fate if you can't own the fact that you stole something? I don't know at that point if you really belong there. I do have a few of these screenshots. Here we go. Let's see. One, and let's keep going. These might come out of order. I don't know. You'll have to let me know, my friends. So these were leaks that he posted that he tried to delete that were snatched back up because people have message logs. So basically you can see he takes the Order of the White Roses Bank, and Kiwi more or less holds the bank hostage. It's been a very interesting situation. From what I understand right now, there was a bit of an issue with what Istendor was doing beforehand. Kiwi basically held everything, all the money hostage and demanded leadership of the alliance. And now Istendor still has control of the Discord server and that kind of stuff. So he's demanding billions plus like an apology or he'll delete it. So you can see how mature the whole situation is, rather than just going and doing his thing, going and owning up to it. There's going to be 5-year-old drama for the next week over this whole thing, but it is what it is. What do you expect, right? Scammers are going to scam, and you're going to have to live with the consequences. Speaking of scams and bank loots and other such discussions, the Federation got looted for $750 million on the 29th, and their bank value was approximately $24 billion at that time. ASM got looted for just under $1.1 billion, giving their bank a total value of approximately $43 billion. Yeah, I don't understand it. It's like it's a trend. And following that kind of theme, an individual, I think he's the second in command, but I don't know, and I'm not gonna. So second in command potentially of the fighting pacifists was blockaded with $2.6 billion in food on his nation. And I think that about wraps that up. So there's a lot of bank looting going on. So if you have not given raiding a try yet, give it a try, because evidently offshores just don't care anymore. So any alliance leaders here with an offshore, please let me know. I'd love to come pay it a visit. Other than, and I get confused about that, because sure, people get looted from time to time, but you have certain people who you put on there as like, this is their job. Their one responsibility is to log in and not lose money. And they don't, I do get it, because I've had incidents happen, but at the same time, when you're being the offshore for that level of cash, I don't know. So, I mean, if any offshores are here, and rather than get looted, they'd rather just give it to me, I'll take it. But just log in, and well, there's one thing on that. I mean, a lot of times what happens is people will want to wait until towards the last few minutes, just so they don't have to interrupt the status quo of what's going on. The issue with that is you can get very busy when you're supposed to move things, or you can have something come up, or you just forget, right? That happens. But any of those happening costs the Alliance a significant sum. See, these people are lucky that, like, if it had been, like, for instance, ASM has their, I wonder if it's still the same offshore. Let's see. Let's see. Is this the same offshore? Yeah, it appears to be. So, I don't know how you can, how one goes about not losing as much. I guess at the time, I'm probably looking at the wrong one. At the time, ASM has been very fortunate, and these other they're very fortunate they have so many people in their offshore, which at the same time, it's kind of, what's the point of having all those people in the offshore if none of them are able to move it? But the thing is they only got looted for what, 1.1 billion, and if you have only one person in there, like is in there now, there's only one person in that offshore, you're losing 40% of your bank. And the event that happened, that for $43 billion, well, hell, that's quite a problem. So they got lucky. Everyone got lucky. And that's my opinion on that. So, moving on from all these lootings, Carthago. This is really interesting. They left the back rooms and signed the Knights Radiant and then name withheld. Now, for some reason, there we go. Politics and War was just not working. So, I've not seen any recent tiering charts. If someone has one, I would appreciate if they could pop it in the chat. But there have been some sphere reshakings, and Carthago is not a very low tier. They've got some pretty high tier members. There's been a significant shakeup in the order of things. And you can see that as evidenced by whatever the hell a temporary MDP is. Basically, the Commonwealth signs Aurora, right? This is a very interesting time, I would say, because the Knights Radiant is gathering some very high tier alliances around itself. If you look at themselves, they've always had a pretty high tier up there. Name withheld has some people up there. All the prots TKR have people up there. Carthago definitely has people up there. The Black Knights have people up there. It just seems a lot like they're gathering the ability to become pretty strong in C20, C30 tier. So, who knows? I'm just spitballing, but Knights Radiant's becoming pretty powerful in their upper tiers over there. The other thing I do think that warrants mentioning is that TFP has a lot of options right now, and so does the Commonwealth. Anywhere the Commonwealth or TFP go that they can be signed, they'll provide a pretty large boost to. The other end of that is if any one of them, or either one, TFP or the Commonwealth, wanted to start their own sphere, that option is technically also open to them. The Commonwealth already has, between all their prots and then their 2 M levels, enough to gather together a not so bad fighting force. They could at least match the Perpetuals, if not beat them out. But there are also, like, I'm not going to speak for Epi because Epi has said he loves sitting paperless right now. But if someone was to convince Camelot to sign a treaty, that could end up being a sphere at some point. Right? TFP and Camelot, the Commonwealth. I'm not even looking at the foreign affairs situation on this. I'm just throwing things out there, my friends. You look at the floating alliances, though, too. There's Bourbon Street and the Global Alliance and Treaty Organization. They might not be a bad addition to something. There's the Legion. They're probably looking for somebody to talk to, although if Kiwi's still here, he can vouch or not vouch for that. The point is if you were to take... Oh, I didn't say they were best friends at all. But I'm just, why not, right? Like, sit down and set some stuff aside and see, can we make the game interesting? Eclipse aren't exactly the most lovable of people, and yet they and Rose and ASM all managed to find a treaty to work on together. So, and even if you set Camelot aside and set the Commonwealth aside, right? You still have the Global Alliance and Treaty Organization, you have Bourbon Street, and you have the Legion. Put all of them with the Commonwealth or put them with TFP, and that's still like another quote unquote sphere. Is it competent? Is it dysfunctional? Probably not to the first and probably to the second. But there are options for all these individuals rather than just jumping on to make Midgard even more massive on the freaking treaty web or just floating around. And I think it should be reviewed. I think everyone should sit down at some point and take a look at where their priorities need to be. Last bit of major news that dropped. Spanky has dropped, oh, good grief, hundreds of megabytes of Federation government chats talking about a potential merge with Soldiers of Liberty and a whole bunch of other stuff. So if you haven't seen those in Royal Orbis news yet, take a look. They are actually quite interesting. Just scroll up for the last few days, that kind of stuff. No need to read the whole thing unless you've lost your mind. But yeah, that's really the summary of the last few weeks. It always seems like there's a lot going on, but there never gets to be that much. Mechanically, the game broke for a while. We all saw that coming, right? The tutorial is being worked on. It seems like it's getting closer to completion, which will be nice. Having a tutorial that's actually useful would be great for the game. Somebody brought this up earlier, and so a raider won the war, and when they won the war, they beat their opponent. They looted a solid -4 bauxite. How the code breaks to that extent, I don't understand. I really don't get how things can go that horribly wrong when they work so well in other scenarios. But it has. So, I mean, like, what happens if it does that when you have no box? Do you just go to -4 as your total? Like, it really, you have to wonder how many of these updates are good things and how many of them are just going to cause problems. Because remember, this was a project, this was like a computer science project. This was that, yeah, that's what I say. If you had 0, what happens? Do you just go to -4? That's the other question. Did the person already have negative boxes? I don't know what the answer is there, but something broke somewhere, and you have to reckon this was like a computer science project. This game, it's patchwork. It has been admitted to be patchwork. Every time something is updated, every time something is adjusted, you are taking apart a jalopy and putting in Audi sports car parts. Particularly if Village is doing the work. Somewhere there's going to be a disconnect. Like what happens when you raid a solid -4 bauxite. There's a disconnect somewhere. Unless you sit down, you take the whole car apart, you scrap it, and you build yourself a new Audi. So every time we get an update, every time we get new features or new projects, old patchwork is being replaced with new steel. That doesn't always work. So in this case, I think, no, it's not, sadly. I'm sorry. I wish it was. It would be great. I wish, right? Could you imagine a Politics and War radio show big enough to have real world sponsors sitting down and caring about it? That would be hilarious. Village is great. He actually tries and he does a fantastic job. I'll hand that to him, absolutely. Speaking of Village, for those of you that might have missed it, because some people just ignore the forums, Higaz posted a follow-up to Village's massive poll thingy bobber before. And so this one just talks about basically doing what Nations at Risk does, where when a nation is inactive, anyone can raid it, except they're limiting that, so they're capping it at C15. City 15 and below can raid any inactive nation. And when you exit vacation mode, you are going to be given a beige timer for about a day based on the poll. So that's not bad. I think it'll be very interesting. Hell, I might even delete some cities to get back down into C15 range, depending upon what goes on there, because rating will be extremely different, but extremely profitable and not profitable at the same time. Tiering is going to be odd, yeah, but the other thing with rating is there's really no longer a reason to sit and raid at City 3. Unless you've got active targets that you're hitting, and those are where most of your income is coming for, you can be fighting a City 14. On average, yeah, raid profits are going to go up because more people are going to be able to take advantage of all those inactives and yada yada, but the raiders themselves are going to watch their profits go down because sure, they're going to have more targets, but everybody is going to have more targets. And you bet your butt the alliances are all going to make sure their members are raiding in that range. So it'll be interesting. Particularly the lower tier raiders, I think, are going to have to adjust unless they're focusing just on actives. Because anyone in like the city 1 through city, I'm going to spitball and say 7, unless you're rating inactives or you're rating, like you, Huckleberry, anyone who's now, if you, it depends. Are you rating actives or focusing on inactives? Because if you're focusing on actives, you don't have to change at all. If that's where the majority of your profits come from, actives are fine. You can sit there. But if you're profiting because you have if you're profiting because you have a whole slew of inactive targets, you're not going to have that anymore. You're going to be fighting with people 3 times as large as you are for targets. So it'll be an interesting change. That's why a lot of raiders had a issue with this, because it was going to affect their. It'll be interesting to see what happens with it, and it'll be interesting to see how badly the game breaks when it's pushed live. Will it be a well-liked change? I think it'll do well. I don't think the raiding community is going to like it very much, but compared to the game at large, active raters aren't that large a percentage. And so when you take, even if, let's say, 40% of all active players between City 3 and City 15 are active raiders, which that's not even close. 20% is probably an exaggeration. The majority would still be in favor of it. So I do think you're going to have at least 3/4 of the players be in favor of this if they're able to take advantage of it. Now, if you just have idiots raiding, well, sorry, they're not going to, they might vote against it because they can't use it properly. So, the last thing I want to get to is, it came up to me because I was messing around in the Balkans and Ron again, and somebody brought up, and it's true, mini spheres as an idea. And I know I talk about this a lot, but it's something that really, it's a philosophy. I like philosophy. I like talking about philosophical kind of things. And that's really what mini spheres is in this game. Is it's a philosophy, but it's a very remote and not necessarily attainable philosophy. And as GVH mentioned in the Balkans, there's an issue with the idea of mini spheres. And it's the same issue with the idea of congressional term limits in the United States. The people who have to enact the change are negatively impacted by it. For the United States, Congress is who has to pass and approve congressional term limits. Congress will never approve congressional term limits because it's not in their interest. In politics and war, alliances, in particular alliance leadership and alliance foreign affairs, have to give up power, give up allies, and open themselves up to attack on the assumption that other people will do the same thing in order for mini spheres to work. Even if one group is willing to make that sacrifice, they still won't do it because nobody trusts everybody else to make that sacrifice. There's a limit to how far you can push an FA team on mini spheres because there's a limit to how far they can sacrifice or are willing to have the human capability to sacrifice their interests and their alliance's interests for the quote unquote good of the game, which most people don't even necessarily agree on. So this brings me to the final thing, the THT, which stands for thought. I would like to have debates. I think this could be good in general to kind of help get an understanding out there of what people are referring to when they talk specific things. Like Jax Teller, if he's still the leader of the Dead Rabbits, he used to be, he is strongly in favor of a bipolar world. He wants two spheres, and that's it. Two sides. There'll still be some info. Back when you had the whole NPO stuff. That's what he wants. And then you have other people who push mini spheres. And I think it would be interesting to have that kind of debate. There are plenty of other topics, but that debate in particular, because I would love to see what the arguments are. Bipolarity is based on stuff that has already happened and that people have experienced before. There is real evidence to corroborate any argument you choose to make or to refute any argument you choose to make. Minispheres is based on an idea that has not been implemented yet, and we've not really. They say, proponents of minispheres say, we've not really seen. So, and what even is minispheres? When you take a look at, for instance, I don't consider minispheres everybody breaking up into like 3 alliance spheres and fighting each other constantly. I don't consider that. I would consider minispheres, or I would accept as minispheres, basically when you go back to what we had with Hollywood and Celestial, but with both of them smaller. I'm not saying Hollywood and Celestial again. Minisphere, well, then I'm probably looking at it wrong, but the idea of minispheres has always been, or from what I understand, has been to create a diverse political landscape in which you have many small political entities that fight each other on short wars, but constantly. Like at least a war a month for an alliance, at least, if not 2. I don't look at minispheres that way because that'll never happen. You will never have, but I don't support multipolarity either. And I'll get to that in a second. Minispheres will never happen for 2 reasons. Not to the extent of 3 to 4 alliances. There are 2 reasons for that. Maybe 3. We'll get to. First, you have to disband alliances like Grumpy, Rose, and TKR. Those all have to go. Because they are not going to sit there. And this brings me into the second thing. They are not going to sit there alone against 4 other alliances. It wouldn't. That's the thing, Huckley. You cannot disband the entire top 10. People would love that. You can't do it. And those top 10 are not going to sit there and not treating anybody. Even if they did, other minispheres are going to ally each other to gang up on other people. We've seen this over and over again. And the issue, Grave, is that it comes back to what I was agreeing with GVH on. You have to have the leadership of an alliance agree to give up power, which there's allies and basically political capital by having those allies and treaties. They have to everybody, not just 1, not just 2, not just the top few spheres. Every alliance in the game has to sit down and agree to give up on hoarding political capital and political treaties and CBs and this kind of stuff. Everybody has to sit down and agree to that. And then you have to have matchmaking. And that entire process would be a constitutional convention in politics and war. Those are the issues. And so, well, the issue is, Epi, is that minispheres, then there's no real room for an individual alliance either. The goal of minispheres is to improve the power of each individual alliance, but there is no real room for an individual alliance. They only become part of their minisphere entity. And at that point, you might as well merge everyone that's in a minisphere into one alliance and just have every alliance be paperless. Because individual alliances, they have no true political authority in a minisphere's environment. They do not control anything in their surrounding areas. There's no point in a one-on-one alliance war, because there's no reason for a mini-sphere to let that happen to its ally when that's like a quarter of the sphere that's going to weaken them for another potential fight. Alliances lose their individual identity and become part of the sphere. And at that point, just the difference is, at that point, just have everyone go paperless. So the other thing is multipolarity. People are probably going to yell at me. I would consider multipolarity more or less what we had a while back and what we have now. What we had with Hollywood, and not in name, where everyone is equal. I'm going to specify that now. Not in name. But the issue with multipolarity is the same as it is with minispheres. Minispheres mandates a balanced playing field. But there are 1,000 sides in minispheres. Multipolarity only mandates maybe 4 or 5. But again, the playing field has to be balanced. I personally would be fine with a situation where you have a downsized Hollywood and a downsized Celestial, where you have 2 spheres that are larger on average than the other spheres, but not as monstrous as Hollywood and Celestial, where you could have 2 people team up and not even be close to beating them. I think having 2 Titans that battle it out from time to time, but also having a whole array of other spheres that can gang up with each other and hit Hollywood or hit Celestial, the theoretical Hollywood or theoretical Celestial. And that is what I personally think would be best, because you have multipolarity in a way. And I think a lot of these aspirations are great, but I don't know if they're realistic. Multipolarity is probably the most realistic because it'll happen on the way to minispheres. The issue with minispheres, in my opinion, is it wants to destroy established communities. Maybe not in name, but it has to destroy communities. Because minispheres cannot exist in a world where Grumpy exists. MCM, I believe the Syndicate Milcom, has specifically said this in Ron, that Grumpy has to go. And I don't agree with that, because then Rose, the Syndicate, TKR, TFP, the Immortals, everybody has to go. Oh, well, that's the thing, Grave, is I'm not supporting that specific environment, because Hollywood, Clock, and Celestial were all unstoppable. There was no one could really fight any of them. Backrooms could have if they'd teamed up, but everyone was a coward and didn't want to team up. I'm talking like a clock-sized Celestial and a clock-sized Hollywood, like smaller levels, and then you have like backroom-sized spheres, like 4 of those, or something in that area, where you have spheres. You have, like, 2 larger ones, and then a bunch of kind of larger ones, if you get what I'm saying. There are still 2 top dogs that battle it out. Well, and that's the other issue, is I reached out to the Johnsons, I reached out to Haunted Mansion, I reached out to the Backrooms, I reached out to a bunch of people to roll Celestial and roll other people, and they all sat there and didn't want to do it. So It is what it is. That's the other issue, and that's where initiative is required for mini spheres and for active war, and people don't take the initiative here. They wait to see who else does, and then they go dogpile them. So I am not personally okay with any ideology, because that's what these are in this game. Any ideology that demands the death of an alliance. Because that is essentially the ideology demanding others pay for its own insufficiencies. And why would you adopt it at that point if it's going to make somebody else pay for it being insufficient? There's always going to be somebody who's the evil person there. Always. Somebody's going to be too big of a sphere and get blown up by everybody else for it or attacked by it for it. Multipolarity is pretty much the same thing, but on a larger scale. So that brings me to bipolarity, and I don't support bipolarity either because, well, I do, but I don't. And I'll put it to you this way. If bipolarity was not true bipolarity, where you have two groups that are all internally allied, and then they just go head to head with each other, I don't support that because that will lead to stagnation. And somebody's mentioned that before. I think people have mentioned that in here and obviously elsewhere. You kill the game because there's a loser, and once there's a loser, they can never catch up to the winner. What would be a great mechanic, Grave, is not push smaller alliances out of the top 100. Bring back it costs a credit to found an alliance. That will hurt. Well, my thing would be it costs a credit to found an alliance. That'll stop a new player from creating their own alliance. And then cap it at 100 alliances in the game. But that's fine. It doesn't really matter. These new players need to be in a specific area. They need to be in a qualified alliances. In a qualified alliance. That, or like Darkblade said, city limit would be better. But then you can never have a low tier alliance. I'd almost want, if you just capped it at 100 alliances in the game, made it a waiting list and other stuff. That kind of ends offshores. And B, it forces people into an established alliance where they can learn the game. There's just, there are cons to everything, and there always are. But bipolarity, going back to that, well, Avatar Patrick, my thing with bipolarity is if it's like it was, like I understand it to be, which I don't know if this is accurate or not, back with NPO, you had people within the same coalition of a war fighting a different war with it against each other. So Coalition A had people fighting a war on the side. So, you had Part A of Coalition A fighting Part B of Coalition A. Things like that is something that I would support, is if, for instance, you have different spheres within these coalitions. And just like take a look at Midgard, right? And now add on, hell, I don't know, Rose to Midgard with the Commonwealth, and take everyone else and tie them together. But make it like a one-off tie, right? So make it like World Task Force ties the Coven. And the Coven ties Soldiers of Liberty. And or not even the Coven. Sanctuary ties Soldiers of Liberty. And the Elites tie House Stark. Some massive chain where it's a spread out bipolarity because they're still all related, but they can also go to war from time to time. Multipolarity would be great, Epi, but I think it's used just as much a bludgeon as minispheres are. I think it would be used as I genuinely think it would still be used the same way minispheres are, and you're still going to have people call for the death of alliances like Grumpy. If I'm wrong, absolutely, then multipolarity is that I'm all for multipolarity in theory, but in reality, and just like I'm all for minispheres, in theory, in the idea of creating a diverse environment for politics and war in general, and not just the game, but politics as a field and war as a field. And yet, then you apply it. You apply what actually, well, you extrapolate what this is telling you needs to happen. And you say, oh, well, that alliance can't exist anymore. And rather than take a step back and say, okay, well, how can we revise what this is meant to be? Or how can we make this a better theory? It's no, the obstacle must go. So that's where I disagree with, I guess, true multipolarity. I'm fine with 70% multipolarity, where you have two larger spheres and then a bunch of lesser spheres that are all equal that can team up and beat up the larger guys. And I know that that's not always going to happen, but then you can still have the 1v1s of those smaller guys. And I think that's the best that things will ever get to be, or things that ever would get to be. Mini spheres is too unrealistic. You have to destroy too much. And multipolarity is the most realistic option at the moment. The most likely, at least. So this brings me to the question, now that I've talked myself hoarse. Would you all like to see debate nights where people, and they'll be scheduled, and they will be between people who hopefully know what they're talking about? You all can suggest names and I can reach out, or people can reach out to me. Would you all be for debate nights? Topics like, mini spheres, bipolarity, multipolarity. Topics like, should we cap alliances at 100? Should it cost a credit? Topics like, should offshores no longer exist? Things like that. 1 in the chat for yes, 2 for no. Topics like, should we kill Farkistan and other useless alliances? I've got 5 1s, 6, 7. It's just, it'll all be debated. Okay, so I don't see anyone objecting. And if you are, I don't see you, so you don't count. And oh no, I mean kill, like utterly just delete the alliance. But oh, Deca, hello. So for Deca, you missed it. We were just talking about should we hold debate nights. Oh no, Grave, you're not voting on whether or not you should kill Farkistan. You're voting on should we have debate nights that will allow people to debate on these topics. So Deca, we're talking about essentially ever hosting debate nights. Thalmor has his Thalmoria, his court of Thalmoria. I kind of have my debate stage. Bring people on, debate things like multipolarity or minispheres, bipolarity, capping alliances at 100 in existence at a time, things like that. 1 for yes, 2 for no. So I've seen pretty much unanimous yes. So is it the 19th now? I thought it was the 14th. I could have sworn it was the 14th. Hold on. Preliminary trial date is Friday, October 14th. So, unless he changed it without saying it in the court chat, which would be, or an announcement, it's still the 14th for anyone interested. So, I think I will sit down and take a look and pull some people. I will at some point drop a topic in this channel, so feel free to check back in once or twice a day. And I'm sorry to hear that. Hi, King. You all are more than welcome to give me name suggestions for people to come on and debate. I'll have to put together some rules on how things will work. I don't want to have just somebody unfettered talking for an hour. At the same time, I don't want to have to mute them. So I think what I'll do is there'll probably be some noise or whatever to alert them once they've had their 2 minutes or whatever. We'll figure it out. I'll come up with some rules and we'll see when the next debate will be. Final call. Is there anything else I need to talk about tonight? I think I've kind of covered on everything. Kiwi, how's the Legion? Y'all gonna survive? Assuming Kiwi's even... Oh, good, he is. Yeah. Does he still have access to the Discord? Nah. Okay, well, looks like everything is good for you guys. And also Kiwi, yes. So, let's see. Who's in the audience? We are going to give everyone in the audience the Lysandite roll if they don't already have it. Avatar Patrick, you've already got it. Congratulations. You were one of those late listeners before, which I appreciate. I still remember that specific episode where you earned that. Let's see. Epi's already got it because he was there. There were like 17 people I gave it out to. Gnome was there at random, so everyone here shall have it now. Congratulate if you didn't already. CCT and Kiwi were both there. Shout out for them. Yeah. Oh, what happened? Somebody moved. Okay. Key, congratulations, you get it. And why are you? Oh, every time I'm giving people without a role, and it's changing where they are in the audience. This is really weird. Okay. Discord just does retarded things from time to time. Did I miss anyone? It doesn't look like it to me. So if you don't have it, ping me. No, you cannot sell the roll. What did you win? Well, who knows? I might make a giveaway for viewers of this channel sometime. I am rolling in the dough, so wouldn't that be fun? If you can't, I am not letting you sell your roll because I don't want to have to keep track of that. That's why. So, again, final call. Anything real world or in game or nations at risk that I should cover? I see nothing. I am going to encourage everyone one more time to check out Nations at Risk. I've actually had a pretty fun time, and I think the only thing really holding it back is player base. I think it needs a lot more play. Once it hits like 1,000 active players, 2,000 active players, it's going to be a massive game. There's just not much active fighting when it comes to war because of the fact that people are right now focused on growing, getting newbies together, and there aren't many troublemakers over there yet that are stirring things up. So I think once the game gets to that size, it's going to be a good game. I personally encourage you all to apply to Odyssey because that's where I'm at, and I want to cause difficulties for the. I'm going to take being under Zig as my leader has been an experience. That has been it. It is weird to have Zig be the leadership. But yeah, so good luck to everybody. Spread the word about Nations at Risk. And I think I'm going to, yes, be spooky. The next show is actually, I envy Thalmor. He's going to get to have the last laugh before spooky season. Let's see here. Yeah, I'll see y'all in 2 weeks, and he'll get you 3 days before spooky season. Well, not spooky season, spooky day, I should say. I get to have everyone before Thanksgiving, though. Yes, get in the ground floor for everyone. I'm almost top 100 people already. I am not posting your referral link. Are you talking about my? Oh, Kiwi. Now I have to go log back in. Give me a second. Life is hard. The only thing that I should warn everybody about, the remind me button to save your information is busted. So don't expect that it'll work because it won't. And be honest, Kiwi, I have no idea where to go to get my referral link. Oh, here it is. Hold on. There we go. I'm not a complete idiot, just partial. Here we go. So, give it a try. Take a look. And yeah, get in on the ground floor, though, seriously. Politics and more. If you imagine if you've gotten in early, just where you'd be at now. I'm already almost top 100 nations. And right now, that's, top 20% of the game, active players. In a year, that might be top 5%. So get in on the ground floor, my friends. Check it out. Don't dismiss it. It's very easy to do so, but nothing good ever comes from dismissing things. And with that, who is still here? Nobody that can help me. So that means I get to play the theme again. And you all will have a fantastic evening. Let's see how this goes. Like we didn't dismiss. Yeah, Affairs in Order is dead and it always will be. Good night.